Looking forward to exploring the topic of food and quality of life. Both of those are some of my favorite topics. There may be some of you who already watched the webinar on Sunday, so for this, you'll go into another deeper level of understanding. And for those who are just coming new, welcome, and I look forward to diving into this topic with you. It's a topic that's relevant to everyone. The topic is quality of food equals quality of life. And being part French, I greatly enjoy delicious meals. It's part of my DNA. Ever since I was small, I was fortunate to grow up with hot, freshly cooked meals every day, thanks to both of my parents being excellent cooks. And as a child, I also had the opportunity to benefit from some of the best milk I've ever tasted worldwide from the local organic Radiance Dairy. As you can see here on the photo, I already was interested in connecting with the source of my food, even at an early age. I also like to grow food and to take pictures of the dishes I create, so you'll see some of those things on the slides throughout the talk. Throughout my travels around the world and researching consciousness, I've repeatedly noticed the extraordinary impact that food has on my state of mind and body. I know for a fact that the quality of the food I eat influences my perception, my awareness, and my overall well-being. Today, I'll speak about this importance of food in creating health, balance, and wellness, as well as its influence in supporting our growth of consciousness. Eating, drinking, and breathing are three universal needs of daily life shared by humans all around the world. What we eat connects us with nature in a very concrete and tangible way, as we directly ingest elements of the near and far environment through our dietary choices. Food also connects us with each other through the social element of eating together, whether through a daily meal or a seasonal feast. Here in the United States, Thanksgiving is one of the major annual holidays, which we celebrate this month, and it's centered around giving thanks for the abundance of nature and for our relationships. This is expressed through good food and company as children, parents, grandparents, relatives, and family friends all come together to celebrate their blessings. Although eating is something we do every day, how often have you thought about the quality of your food? Not just the taste or the texture or the calories or carbohydrates in it, but the actual quality of the food. These qualities represent the elements that you are taking into your body now, which will become part of your future reality. AyurVeda, the science of lifespan, points out that anything we take in through our senses must be digested and processed by the nervous system. This includes the food we eat, the water we drink, the air we breathe, the media we consume, the people we are around, and also the knowledge we focus on. If we want to maximize our health and well-being, it's important to consider all these elements that are coming into our body from near or far, as well, of course, as our digestive strength. Maharishi Mahesh Yogi, a renowned teacher best known as founder of the Transcendental Meditation technique, has said that food is that experience which satisfies. Food comes to us as packets of intelligence from nature that support and nourish our body's own intelligence. An Indian proverb states, "Mind depends on the quality of food." In the United States, we can also say, "You are what you eat." So in this talk, I will be outlining four main areas related to the concepts of quality of food equals quality of life. First, how do we discern the qualities in our food? Second, what is the deeper basis of the surface qualities we perceive in the food? Third, how can we maximize the vitality and nourishment of the food we eat? And fourth, three types of food and their effects on us. We'll review what Maharishi and the Vedic literature, which is the oral record of the total knowledge of natural law, have to say in regards to food, and also assess practical steps of what we can all do to consume the highest quality of food for our own bliss and for creating a vibrant and healthy planet. So first, let's start with the qualities. How can we discern what qualities are in our food and their effect on our mind and body? Here on the slide, you see many types of food and many descriptive words. Take a moment to consider which adjectives would fit each photo. We can also do it together, starting from, we'll go clockwise here from the top right. So we have a smoothie drink here, which is liquid, cold, and sweet. We have hot tea, so that would be hot and liquid. This apple pie is sweet. It's also other things, but mostly sweet. The pineapple chutney is sour, liquid, and tasty. This chocolate cake is sweet and heavy. This chapati flatbread is plain and light. It's also quite dry. This vegetable dish, I believe it's malai kofta, is spicy, hot, and tasty. Hot here, I mean temperature, not the spice level, but the actual temperature is hot. These cookies are sweet and dry. This green salad is light and raw. And these mashed potatoes are heavy and plain. They could be also spiced, but these ones are more plain, just a simple mashed potato. So here we can see different qualities in the food. Our five senses give us the first impression of the quality of the food in front of us, particularly through the smell of it, the taste of it, and the sight of it. The food's texture, that's that sense of touch, and the sound of eating it also have an impact on us. Our mind and intellect bring perceptions to the food as well. For example, if we know that a particular dish is very good for us, or if we know that a loved one cooked it for us, we have more of a fine feeling level being nourished by eating that food. So now that we've looked at some of the qualities in food, what's the deeper basis of these qualities that we see on the surface? If we go deeper into the mechanics of nature, as explained by Ayurveda, we'll see that our five senses are related to the five elements, which are part of the 8 Prakriti. I'll be using some Sanskrit words for these terms, so you'll see them in italics on the slide. Here we have the word Prakriti. Sanskrit is considered a language of nature, and it's easier to use the original words for some of these concepts. So the 8 Prakriti are considered in Vedic science to be the basic structuring dynamics of manifest creation. These 8 aspects of nature's intelligence, as you can see here, earth, water, fire, air, space, mind, intellect, and ego. And in Sanskrit, we have Bhumi, Apas, Agni, Vayu, Akasha, Manas, Buddhi, and Ahaṁkāra. These 8 aspects of nature's intelligence are outlined in the Bhagavad Gita, which is a well-known text of the Vedic literature. So the first 5 Prakriti also correspond to the 5 elements, as I was just mentioning, and to the 5 senses. Here on the top line, we see that Bhumi Prakriti, which is connected to the element of earth, is actually more represented by a quality, that of solidity or structure. We can see the earth-like quality of solidity in foods that are dense and heavy, whereas the fluid quality of water is more seen in liquid foods like soup. If we want to go more deeply, even to the source of these qualities, we can look at Maharishi Vedic science understanding. Maharishi Mahesh Yogi combined the traditional understanding of Vedic science with his own insights into the nature of the mind and consciousness to bring out Maharishi Vedic science, which is also known as the science of consciousness. Maharishi Vedic science highlights the idea that the whole universe is composed of 2 fundamental values: Purusha, silence, and Prakriti, dynamism. These overall qualities of intelligence are found embedded in every grain of creation on the level of transcendental consciousness. We see that here at the bottom of the chart. This level of consciousness equates with the source of thought, the most silent level of our own mind. Maharishi compared the mind to an ocean. So at the top here, we see the surface waves, our surface thoughts, and then thought can go subtler and subtler and subtler. And then the source of thought transcendental consciousness is beyond the manifest. So the term Purusha represents absolute silence, that unmanifest area of creation, and Para Prakṛiti, undivided nature, is the pure potentiality of dynamism. So it's also unmanifest. And then the 8 Apāna Prakṛiti, which I mentioned before, that divided or manifest nature, refers to the 8 fundamental reverberations of consciousness that give rise to diversity. So here we see again all the elements listed. That's how we experience diversity in the world. We can experience the unified source of all these elements, of all the 8 Prakriti, by transcending through transcendental meditation. When we transcend, our awareness opens up to more and more subtle layers of perception, eventually reaching, as I mentioned before, the source of thought. And this simple mental technique brings our mind and awareness to that unified value at the source of creation, that unified value of silence and dynamism, where all the qualities are balanced in wholeness. So this is the source of all those qualities. When we return into activity after experiencing this inner wholeness, we'll naturally be drawn more to food and experiences that are suitable for us due to our increased alertness and clarity of mind. When we come back into the realm of diversity, we can apply the ancient science of Ayurveda, which contains extensive knowledge of the 3 doshas, which are a further categorization of this governing intelligence of nature. So here on the right, we see the 3 doshas. The word dosha itself means impurity. Each dosha is a mixture or combination of 2 prakriti. The 3 doshas are vata, pitta, and kapha. So starting from the more solid values on the side of the chart, we'll see that kapha is, the qualities of kapha are seen in the qualities of earth and water that make it up. So some of those qualities are soft, heavy, and sticky. The qualities of pitta dosha are made up of the qualities of water and fire that make it up. Those are the elements. And these include hot, sharp, and liquid. And the qualities of vata dosha are seen in the qualities of the elements of air and space that make it up. For example, cold, dry, and light. So if we remember the qualities we were discerning before in the food, we can see that each food item is essentially made up of a combination of elements. And with a proper understanding of these principles, we can examine any of the foods in our diet and identify which prakriti or elements are predominant in them, and then which doshas they'll increase. A principle in Ayurveda is that like increases like. Something that is hot in nature will increase pitta dosha, because pitta, as we see here, has a hot quality. Something that's cooling will balance or decrease pitta dosha. For example, the element of fire, Agni Prakriti, is seen in tomatoes or red fruits, as evidenced by their color, which is similar to the color of fire. Ayurveda also mentions that tomatoes increase pitta dosha, which is that combination of fire and water. Maharishi Jyotish, the science of prediction, and Maharishi Ayurveda, the knowledge of lifespan, recognize that each person has a personal prakriti. That's that balance of the elemental influences in them at birth. Someone's prakriti could be pitta or pitta kapha, it can be a combination. But knowing our inborn prakriti helps to inform us about what might be the best activities or foods, daily routines, even careers for success in life based on our inborn nature. People with a pitta prakriti don't generally like hot weather because it increases the element of fire and can make them irritable or uncomfortable. They will likely prefer cool climates and lots of swimming much more than the hot tropics, since their physiology already has a lot of that fire quality, that Agni Prakriti within it. Depending on what they eat and engage in on a daily basis, these inborn Prakriti can either stay in balance or become aggravated due to accumulated doshas. If they eat too many tomatoes, for example, they may become uncomfortable. If we return to the qualities and pictures of food, we can see that hot tea or coffee, which include the elements of heat and fluidity, often increase pitta dosha, since they contain those elements of fire and water. These liquids express these qualities, again, of the Prakriti apas, water, and Agni, fire. Now, this combination could be excellent in the cold of winter, but not so ideal in the middle of summer. Of course, each physiology is different and has its own needs. The mashed potatoes, on the other hand, are heavy and white. They increase kapha dosha, which is related to earth and water. And a raw green salad is light and crisp and cold. It would increase vata dosha, which is related to air and space. And even in just picking up the salad, we can see that it weighs much less than a potato for the same amount. The Prakriti, these functional intelligences of nature, are found in plants, in rocks, in the environment, and in our own bodies. These 8 Prakriti make up the food we eat, which through our digestion then becomes our body's own structure and intelligence. Therefore, we must pay attention to the natural balance of the Prakriti in our mind, body, and the environment, all 3 of those, the weather is counted as well, for optimum health. This is a vast topic that Ayurveda addresses in great detail, but today I'll just mention a few examples to give you a sense for it. First example, looking at Bhumi Prakriti. In our body, the structural or earth element, Bhumi Prakriti, is expressed in our bones and muscles. In order to maintain healthy bones and muscles, we must have proper nutritional elements in our food, for example, calcium and minerals. And we must also engage in activities of lifting or pushing, such as resistance training. In a sense, we train and develop strength in our body through the weight of the earth. These elements of the Bhumi Prakriti, of earth, get enlivened in our bodies through either eating heavy foods, moving earth, moving Bhumi, moving something heavy, not too heavy, but something that has substantial weight, or if you live in a mountainous area, seeing Bhumi around you, as on this picture. You might have noticed that people who live in the mountains and have to go up and down steep slopes all the time tend to develop very strong and sturdy muscles and bones because there's more Bhumi Prakriti in their physiology. On the other hand, those who live on the islands surrounded by the fluid ocean tend to have a relaxed, flowing perception of time. There's more apas or water Prakriti in their physiology. The foods that naturally occur in a place also support development of those factors needed to successfully live there and survive in those climatic conditions. So for example, you see on the photo, this looks like a coconut palm. In the hot tropics, there are many coconuts. They have that coconut oil, has that heavy white quality, more kapha quality, and that helps to balance, that cooling quality helps to balance the heat of the tropics. We also see this principle of the nature reacting to the weather in cacti found in the desert. They store water within their scaly leaves because there's not very much water in the environment. So as a reaction, they store water themselves. So now that we have some understanding of the qualities and where they come from, how can we have the most nourishment in our food? How do we use this knowledge practically? So we've seen in the last few minutes that the 8 Prakriti, that functional intelligences in nature, come out from pure creative intelligence, that Purusha silence and Para Prakṛiti dynamism, through these 8 levels of transformation into what we see as the surface values of a plant, fruit, or vegetable. And so from that unified source of silence and dynamism comes out all this diversity. And we see that in the climatic conditions present in a local environment, which influence the crops as they grow. So if we can eat local foods, this will naturally help us to balance those Prakriti most predominant in the places where we are living. Every bit of food we eat has a context. It was grown in a particular location by a certain farmer in certain weather conditions, with someone picking it, storing it, cooking it, and serving it. All these influences of the quality of awareness of the people paying attention to that food influences the liveliness of natural law in it. It's prana, or vitality. Prana is a Sanskrit word that means life force or vitality. This is why it's important that we're conscious about what we eat, because it directly influences us as well as our extended environment. One example of prana is that drinking pure spring water may give us more vitality than tap water from an industrial area that's been chemically treated. And also organic food, which is produced without chemical fertilizers and pesticides. And if it's grown in a regenerative way in soil that has been enlivened with microbial life, it has a balanced and lively microbiome, that will have more nutritional value in it and have more nutrients. And this is because that lively microorganisms in that soil help to bring the minerals and the water directly into the plants. There's a very direct connection between the diverse soil life and the nutrition of the plants. So this picture here is of some of my vegetables I grew in my plant and pick garden in upstate New York. They reflect the abundant summer rainfall there. The soil I used was so rich that I literally planted them, never watered. I planted them and then came back a month later and picked them. Maybe it was 2 months by the time they were this big. But the key point is, if the soil is abundant and if the natural environment is conducive, there's not much work that needs to be done to grow your own vegetables. Maharishi Vedic organic agriculture uses this knowledge of the transformations in nature in order to enliven the maximal nutritional value in every plant. This knowledge is based in that pure creative intelligence, which we saw before, the basis of all the laws of nature that are responsible for turning soil, air, and water into the plants and fruits and vegetables. Maharishi Vedic organic agriculture utilizes Vedic sound, the resonant frequencies of the laws of nature, to enliven the inner intelligence of the plants at various critical stages of development. On a press conference in 2003, Maharishi described the distinction between organic and Vedic organic food. He explained that playing Vedic melodies to the plants allows nutrients to develop more fully due to the positive evolutionary influence that is being added. Organic food has no pesticides, it has no negative value, no toxic value, but in Vedic organic agriculture, the inner being of the plant, that inner quality of the plant and the food is healthier and more nutritious. So at these certain gaps, for example, when the seed is sprouting, or when the first leaves are coming out, or when the first fruits and flowers are coming out, each of those gaps is a time when this knowledge can be utilized. Maharishi also explained that enlightenment, which means living our full inner and outer potential, is the birthright of everyone, and that 3 basic things help to accelerate that growth of enlightenment. Regular transcending through practice of the Transcendental Meditation and Transcendental Meditation City program, so accessing the full range of the mind on a regular basis. Second is maintaining a regular, balanced daily routine with proper rest. And third is eating wholesome, pure organic foods and drinking pure water. So the idea is to maximize our evolution through minimizing the amount of stress that we have to remove from our physiology. We keep it out to begin with, and we have a way to balance ourselves daily. So now I'd like to look at what is the role that specific foods play in determining our quality of mind and our quality of life. In his book, The Science of Being and Art of Living, Maharishi describes the influence of food on the mind. He says, quote, "Food has a very great influence on the mind because it is what we eat and drink that goes to make the blood which sustains the nervous system. Therefore, the quality of food has a great deal to do with the quality of mind. Tendencies of the cook who prepares the meals also affect the food. Likewise, the tendencies of the mind or the quality of thoughts at the time of eating the food affect it and have a corresponding influence on the quality of mind that is produced by that food. It is therefore highly advisable that while he is eating, a man should either be silent in pure thoughts or have good conversation with those at the table. It is always best to say a prayer before we begin to eat. End quote. So in this case, the prayer doesn't need to be a religious one. It's simply a quiet moment to settle down, acknowledge the food, and bring our full attention to eating so that we can gain maximum from the meal. Sitting and being relaxed while eating also helps keep the blood in our digestive system rather than in our muscles if we're moving around or walking. Of course, it could be a religious one too, for those who want to thank God for that abundance that's coming their way, if that's their belief system. Now, another subtler set of qualities that are expressed in the Vedic literature are the three gunas. And all three of these gunas are needed in creation to maintain evolution. So these three qualities are sattva, rajas, and tamas. Sattva refers to creativity and purity. Rajas refers to maintenance and activity. And tamas refers to destruction or dullness. So in any situation where there's growth and progress, there's a part that's creative, a part that's maintaining, and a part that needs to be dissolved. If we want to move from one state to another, some part will need to be dissolved on the way. These three gunas are also seen in the three types of food mentioned in the Bhagavad Gita, chapter 17, verses 7 through 10. As for the food which is dear to everyone, it also is of three kinds. So the Gita describes that sattvic foods are those that increase lifespan, energy, strength, health, joy, and cheerfulness. They are full of savor, smooth, substantial, and agreeable. Rajasic foods are pungent, sour, salty, excessively hot, harsh, dry, and burning. They can cause discomfort and pain. Tamasic food is that which is spoiled, without savor, left over, and even unclean. So the more sattvic or pure the food we eat is, the more those qualities of nature's creative intelligence will be enlivened in our mind and naturally expressed in our activity. Sattvic foods nourish our mental functioning and give us the mental clarity to make those right decisions and undertake effective actions. It's that level of creativity that's innate in us being expressed more fully. Sattvic foods include milk, ghee, yogurt, lassi, dates, mangoes, walnuts, and almonds. Those are the most sattvic foods. Maharishi Ayurveda also recommends vegetarian food, including lighter foods such as fresh vegetables, sun-ripened fruits, most grains, and split or whole moong dal. Although lighter vegetarian food is recommended in general, there is an understanding that some physiologies can support a heavier diet based on their activity levels, nutritional needs, or medicinal purposes. There are elements of Ayurveda that mention the use of meat in certain cases, but generally a vegetarian diet is recommended. So these are some sun-ripened peaches that I was picking one day, and I just love that flavor that comes when you have a fruit right from the tree. It's a completely different experience. Tamasic foods include alcohol, garlic, onions, red meat, leftovers, and packaged foods, which have little life force. Tamas is the opposite of sattva. Tamasic foods can dull our mind and body and cloud the experience of pure consciousness. And again, although garlic can have a dulling impact on certain experiences, it can also help to balance a physiology that might have, for example, an imbalanced Apāna Vāta. It's one of the sub-doshas. So understanding what the quality of the food is helps to give us insight into how to use each food effectively. Because everything has a value in creation, it's just a matter of using the right thing at the right time for the purpose we want to achieve. So for quality of life, it's important what we eat, but also how we digest that food. Sattvic foods help us to develop higher states of consciousness by more easily turning into ojas. Ojas is the most refined product of digestion. It exists at the junction point between physiology and consciousness. It links the manifest value of our physical body with the unmanifest value of pure consciousness. Ojas provides immunity, strength, happiness, and a glow to the face. So we love ojas. It makes us happy. Pure milk and ghee, this is clarified butter, are considered to be among the most ojas producing foods. According to the Vedic literature, food eaten is nourishing for 5 nights, milk nourishing for a month, curds for 20 days, and ghee for a month. Here on the slide, we can see this cooking process of ghee. We start out with the white opaque butter, and it's boiled. And then as a result, the water and the milk solids are removed. And then we end up here with just the clear oil. This is like liquid sunshine. So this clear oil is known as ghee. If the food we eat looks, smells, and tastes delicious and is presented in a pleasing manner on the plate with a range of textures, then all of our 5 senses will be nourished and our digestive process will naturally yield more ojas. Understanding the qualities of different types of food helps us to understand why certain foods make us feel good or not good, happy and balanced or not. Ayurveda is a highly customized and personalized science of life. It acknowledges that every individual is unique and that different physiologies need specific diets and routines to support their own growth and to stay in balance. An athlete, for example, will probably need a much heavier diet than a sedentary person. They'll also need more oil to maintain lubrication in their joints with all that motion. Understanding the principles of Ayurveda deeply and applying them daily can yield enormous benefits for our quality of life and also for that of those around us. An ancient Ayurvedic proverb states that without proper food, medicine is of no use. With proper food, medicine is of no need. So here we see that the microelements in the food also can have a powerful impact on our state of health and well-being. As the world grows more and more conscious and moves towards these ideally nourishing values of food, keep in mind the following. The essential qualities of Vedic food are pure, fresh, fully ripened, and lively with total natural law. This quality of food supports the development of a perfectly balanced and healthy physiology, capable of living full human potential in higher states of consciousness. Based on my own experience of trying many types of food in different countries around the world, different scenarios, I would suggest that for now, what's available, the most nourishing milk one could look for right now would be raw or fresh from pasture-raised, grass-fed, happy, healthy cows in small local dairies. The quality of milk is also extremely tied to the quality of the soil that the grass is grown in, because that's what nourishes the grass that the cows eat and gives the vitality to the milk. The ideal food is fresh, local, organic, grown by a happy farmer, prepared by a happy cook, and eaten in a settled environment. If we eat mainly locally grown and seasonal foods, especially for fruits and vegetables, we also reduce the amount of gasoline needed to bring those items to us. This one action results in cleaner air, more wealth in our local communities, and fresher food. Of course, we can still enjoy many delicious things from around the world. It's just a matter of proportion. Dry foods or spices travel much more easily than fruits and vegetables, which should ideally be fully ripened before picking. Speaking to and supporting our local farmers to grow the foods we want also helps us build a sense of community. With our attention as consumers, farmers, animals, and the crops can all be more lovingly treated. So in conclusion, we've seen today that what we eat directly impacts our quality of mind and consciousness as we take in all the elements, the 8 Prakriti, through food to nourish and balance our physiology. Pure sattvic food creates a strong, vital body. It purifies our physiology, so it is like a clear glass of water that can fully reflect the inner light of our being to the world around us. So if we want to grow in health and wellness, it makes sense to put attention on ingesting the best quality of food and other experiences available to us. Now, of course, enjoying healthy, delicious meals takes time and energy. Cooking requires planning, it requires creativity, being alert to the seasons and the climates we're in. It's important to adjust the menu based on the climates we're in, just the same way we adjust our wardrobe in the spring or the fall to change to fit with the natural law around us. Giving ourselves enough time to fully enjoy the gift of abundance of nature is the key. We need enough time to enjoy. And the corresponding result of vibrant health, ojas, and bliss are definitely worth it. So I wanted to end with this picture of some bliss balls, one of my favorite recipes, especially for traveling, because these have a good balance of protein and carbohydrate, sugar, everything that gives energy, but they're also easy to carry. And I have a recipe for that I will mention in the questions and answers. But this main point is we should be blissful about our food. We should be enjoying our food. And as a result, we'll have the nourishment that will allow us to be in ideal health. Thank you, everyone, for your attention. And now we'll see if there's any questions before I come back to the bliss ball recipe.
Thanks, Nicole. I think we're all going to definitely look at our food in a different way now. And it's really good to think or put our attention on the whole range of food, from how it's grown, how it's transported, how it's prepared, and how we even eat it. And of course, most important, our own consciousness. So there's one question from Andrea. She asks, is home-cooked fresh food that is frozen for a short while okay to eat in an emergency, quotes? I understand it's not perfect, but how quickly does the life force in the food decline? Would you say a freezer is not necessary or desirable?
The purpose of food is to nourish us and keep us moving towards more and more evolution. So of course, if we have an emergency and we need to eat something, then we will eat what's available to us. And I would say that home-cooked fresh frozen food might be better than packaged frozen food from somewhere else, as long as you know how to freeze it properly, because there are mechanics of the bacteria and things that are involved. But the main thing to understand when we look at the qualities of the doshas is cold. That cold quality has less transformative ability. So the pitta, that transforming quality, was hot. So when something is hot, it starts to break down and transform. So if we keep things cold, then they'll stay more in their stable state without changing. That being said, they'll also have that more heavy, cold quality of the kapha. So it would need to be reheated in a way that doesn't break it down too much. But I would say go by your feeling, because if it nourishes you and you feel good eating it, then that's the main point. That's what's going to give you ojas and bliss. And if it's something that you made and you know exactly what's in it, and you need to have a backup sometimes in an emergency, I would say that it would be fine. And also there are certain foods that are frozen, like ice cream, which we like to eat. And it's not that we want to eat that every day, but because it brings us a lot of joy, it helps in the overall nourishing process. It's not bad to have a freezer, but you want to favor more freshly cooked, sun-ripened foods when you can, so that then if there's a need, it won't have so much of an influence on your overall health.
Okay, there are lots of questions coming in. One, I always wonder when fresh, local, seasonal foods are recommended. Can you say something about what if you live in a cold climate where maybe for 8 months a year there isn't any growing going on?
It depends where you are in the world. There are ways with a greenhouse to actually have a 4-season diet. I was studying this when I was in college. Actually, the kale and carrots grown in the winter, you grow them earlier into the fall and they just stay there in a greenhouse. So it's almost like a big fridge. They're actually more sweet because the sugar is a defensive mechanism from the plant against the cold, because when it's very cold, the sugars don't freeze, whereas water would freeze. So the plant has the ability. But there's also, in the traditional diets, in the winter, we have more squashes, kind of pumpkin, yams, things that can be stored. It won't be as much zucchini or fresh fruits, but I would suggest it's okay to get food from elsewhere. You can think how big your local is. It might be local from the United States. That's more local than, say, fresh vegetables coming from Australia or something if you live in the United States. So it's a matter of how far it's traveled. On the other hand, Maharishi was very clear that some countries have used up their soil and depleted it by using a lot of chemicals. And so in that case, it might be better to have the food being flown in from some other country that has very pure soil. So again, it's a balance of seeing how do you keep your health, but also eat locally, and just favoring the local vegetables helps. And favoring the farmers markets, especially in the summer and fall and spring for most of the year, will help the farmers in your area and help you to have more connection to your local laws of nature. Because the more you can eat from your area, the more you're directly connected to that climate. And then the more in tune you'll be overall.
Okay, so Milena asks, where can we find Vedic sound for food?
There's an institute that has the whole knowledge of how to apply the Vedic sound for the food. There are Vedic recitations, I think just Gandharva Ved, which is the music of nature, just playing that has a nice influence. There's certain times of day, but the specific knowledge of how to apply Vedic sound for the plants is available through that Institute of Maharishi Vedic Organic Agriculture.
Someone asked, can you give an estimate on how much it costs to eat this way on a weekly basis?
That's a good question. Depends where you are and what's available to you. If you have some plot of land where you can grow some of your own food, that's a way to really save a lot of money, because vegetables that have to be brought in from far away can tend to cost quite a lot, especially if you want organic. And if you have to go every day to the grocery store or twice a week to the grocery store, that's time, money, energy. So if you can have a little plot of your own and learn how to grow some food, that saves a lot of money. I think it really depends where you are, because if you cook your own food, it's also much less expensive than if someone else is cooking it for you, if you know what you're doing. If you don't know, then you might burn things and then that would cost more. I would say in the US, maybe $300-400 a month for eating organic. And if you're not eating too many processed foods, then your costs are less, because that processing time for someone else is what costs more money. But again, it really depends which country you're in, what's available to you, whether you're in California where all the fruits and vegetables are available for not too expensive fresh, or whether you have to have your food shipped across the country to you. So I know that might not be the satisfying answer, but the more consumers request organic food from their farmers, the more likely it is that you'll have fresh food available for not as expensive, because there are a lot of food deserts in the US where you're not able to find proper fresh food just because that demand hasn't been there and it hasn't been supplied. So it's an important thing to bring up as a consumer to your local farmers.
So Peggy asks, if one does not have access to the ideal milk, is it almost better to stay away from it? Even organic milk is homogenized, pasteurized, and I'm pretty sure they take the babies away from their mother's way too soon.
When the Vedic literature talks about all those benefits, it talks about the benefits of pure milk. And that means the quality of how the cow is treated, the quality of what the cow is eating, how the milk is processed once you get it. That could be a whole own talk just on milk. We did a full moon broadcast on that once, which went into all the details of the subtle qualities of milk. But I think it depends on your own digestive system. That nourishing value of the cow comes across in milk, but if it's been completely changed through processing, then that quality is not as evident anymore. But if you really like it and see that it feels good in your physiology, then you could go ahead and drink it. I like to find really, really good milk and eat lots of that when I have the opportunity. And when I'm not in a place with good milk, I just tend to eat more other things. And I might have more ghee that's a different quality instead.
Thank you for your wonderful presentation. I don't understand why the poor onion is considered rajasic. And you're French, so you may understand the loss working with from a Vedic health view.
All right, so the garlic and onions was actually considered tamasic. Tamasic is that more dulling influence. It's not necessarily a bad thing. Sometimes there's too much liveliness and you just want to settle it down a little bit. And so onions and garlic are not necessarily bad to eat. It's just that they have that more tamasic quality. It's not that the qualities have a good or a bad. It's like we're not giving judgment here. The same way that sometimes you have rain and sometimes you have sun, both are needed for the full blossoming of evolution. We need all the types of weather. It's a matter of how much proportion. I actually don't know that many onion dishes because I've mostly grown up with Ayurvedic food, but I do know that used well, it can be very delicious. And so in that case, that deliciousness would create ojas. The idea is to see how does it influence your own body. If you eat it and you really like it, I would say go for it. If it makes you happy and gives you bliss, your physiology can take it. If you do feel dullness and you feel like you could have some more clarity of mind, you could try removing it from your diet for a week or 2 weeks and just see when you bring it back, what is the influence? Because we might not always be aware what's the influence of foods on us until we stop eating them and then bring them back in.
Is it good for you to drink goat milk?
Goat milk doesn't have the same vitality in Ayurveda as cow milk because the cow is very kapha. If you just look at the animal, it's heavy, it walks around, it chews all day. it's just very kapha. It has that good kapha quality, which brings out more ojas. The goat is jumping around and eating all sorts of things. So it has a more vata influence in the milk. But I know many people who have been recommended goat milk if they can't drink the cow milk, if the cow milk is for some reason too heavy. It's something that you could ask to an Ayurvedic consultant for your particular situation, but I don't think it's not indicated. I think both could be fine.
There's often a saying that the best ingredient in any food is the quality of the consciousness of the cook. So can you explain how a cook influences the food they're cooking?
When the cook puts their attention on the food, we know that what we put attention on grows stronger. And so if the cook is happy and relaxed and enjoying the food, the colors, the smells, as they're cooking, their happiness will become part of that meal. Now, if they're stressed out because they have not enough time to cook, or they don't like the type of food they're cooking, or they have some other situation in their life that's overshadowing them, then that agitation will also come into the food. I personally find when I'm cooking, I need to be well rested because I'm putting energy into the food and then I'm eating it again afterwards, and it's a very enjoyable experience. If I'm tired, then I don't have any energy to put into the food, and then the food won't have that same level of nourishment. So it's very important that the cook is happy and well rested and also enjoys the cooking process. And then the quality of their attention will come naturally into the food, and the people who eat that food will get a result of it. If you can find a good cook, as I said, both my parents are excellent cooks. I get a lot of ojas from eating their food. And I like to cook, but more bake. But if you can find a good cook, it's worth their weight in gold.
Yes, I remember Maharishi said that if you have a good cook, you should really, really take care of your cook. It's very important to take care of a cook. I'm reminded of a book called The Secret Life of Plants, and the book explores the plant's response to human caring and nurturing, and also the reaction to music. Like they said, if you play rock music, the plant grows in a chaotic way, where if you play classical music, the plant grows in a more orderly, coherent way. And it seems like the same, in a way, our influence on the food, it affects the food too.
Our consciousness has a quality to it. The one main point from this talk that I'd like everyone to think about is, what are the qualities that you're taking in from your food and that you're putting into your food? Are you giving your food the attention it needs by being in a settled environment when you eat it? Are you acknowledging the cook? Are you acknowledging the farmer and all those influences that brought you that food? When you do that, then you can notice the subtle distinctions and go for more and more and more quality every day. And just that little bit of attention of your consciousness being like, I want this kind of food versus this, can have a huge change on the whole food system. If everyone in the country decides they only want to buy this type of food, that food will naturally start to come up more and more. So we really have a lot of power in this regard.
I know, it is interesting. I mean, in the last 5-10 years, everywhere you go, you can get vegan food and organic food. More and more organic restaurants are coming up. How do leeks compare to onions? Do they create less dullness?
Well, I don't have a definitive answer on that. There's less of a taste, I believe. So I don't know if that component which creates it would be slightly less. But I that's not my area of expertise, unfortunately, because I don't use either very much in my cooking. I don't know if there's anyone else who would want to answer that question, maybe. It would be more of a question for an Ayurvedic Vaidya who might know the subtle distinctions.
Yeah, I do notice they use it at the Raj in the different health spas, the different Ayurveda health spas.
One reminder is that the tamasic food was without savor. So that it's important that the food is tasty and has some good flavor, because the spices we use help to activate our digestion. Some people think that plain food is the easiest to digest, but actually it's all the components in the spices that help our digestive system to start moving and help digest the food. So if it's a question between being very plain or having some leek, if that leek helps your digestion, then I would say that would be a good thing to use.
In reaction to what I just said about the impact of music on plants, there's research that cows produce more food when listening to classical music and far less when exposed to heavy metal music.
Well, again, looking at the qualities, what would be interesting there is that the classical music would have that more smooth, flowing kapha kind of quality, whereas the rock music would be more jarring and a little bit rajasic, that kind of intense quality. And so the cow is a naturally kapha type of animal that wants to produce milk, which is a kapha quality of food. So if it's not getting that sort of soft, nourishing value, it's going to be harder for it to produce what it naturally wants to produce. So that to me makes a lot of sense. That's why cows generally are out in the fields under the big sky, just munching away. And we can see that when those elements are supported in our society, we will also have a lot more open fields around our cities and towns if we value the cow being outside in nature. And even just having that open space supports our own environment to be less chaotic rather than having everything built in. So we can see how this environment and food relationship works together. We are part of our environment, and the environment affects the food that we then get to eat.
So Sabine says, who we cook for is also very important. My food comes out always much better tasting when I cook for my children, who expect a good tasting food. Once I cooked for a girl who was very concerned with her weight, and everything I cooked went wrong.
An interesting comment, because many people today in society have an interesting relationship with their food. They want to eat it, but then they immediately feel horrible that they ate something, or they think that they shouldn't have eaten that. And Ayurveda is very clear that we favor things or we avoid things. It's not a strict line in stone that you can't have this, you can't have that. The idea is to favor what's good for us and reduce what's not good for us. And so, again, the main point is food should be blissful, because the whole point is, as Maharishi said, food is that experience which satisfies. If it's not satisfying, then we might have eaten some material and put it in our mouth, but it wasn't really food, it wasn't nourishing, and it won't help us to move forward in our evolution. So the thought that we put into our eating is very important, and it's important that we remind our friends and family that food is there for enjoyment. And the French know this a lot, but I think other cultures sometimes might need some reminder.
I think that's a really important point. A lot of people do struggle with their relationship with the food. Like they'll see a piece of chocolate cake and think, oh, I shouldn't eat it. And then they eat it. And then they think afterwards, oh, why did I eat that cake? If you're going to eat the chocolate cake, enjoy eating the chocolate cake and don't worry about it, because that affects the digestion as well, because then afterwards you think, oh, I shouldn't have eaten it. And then the next time you eat the cake and you have all these kind of phobias about eating the cake, you've built all these things up in your mind about eating that particular food. If you have a reaction to it, then well, that's not so good. But the point is, it is really important to enjoy what you eat, and that affects your digestion. And also in Ayurveda, they say the body's intelligent. It will tell you. You can tell the more refined your physiology becomes, the more refined the food is that you eat, the more you'll be able to tell which foods have a good effect on you or don't have a good effect.
And I remember one Vaidya Manohar saying once, he said, ultimately the intelligence in your body knows how to take what you put into it and transform it. So if for one reason you have to eat later one day than you're used to, your body has the ability to adjust, and it has that intelligence. It's always trying to give you the nourishment you need. So if we're just simple and easy and enjoying, and then of course putting attention on planning ahead to make sure we have the food when we need it and that we're not getting burnt out or something without it, then it's just a natural process of growing in better and better food over time, and just being simple about it every day, making some little change that we'd like. Then over time, we'll see that reflected in our own physiology. I want to make sure to share the Bliss Ball recipe. There's a PDF of the actual recipe for those who want to see it. I'm not going to go into the details of the amounts, but just so you have an idea of the overall thing, that we take all these raw ingredients. So we have toasted sesame seeds, raisins, dates, walnuts, cashews, and pumpkin seeds, plus a few spices. And I mix them all here in the food processor. Now it's important to put some dry and some moist ingredients together at the same time. If you have only the moist, like the date and the raisin, it'll become a big mush. And if you have only the dry, then when you add in the raisins, they won't break down properly. So I put them all in together at the same time in the food processor. And then you come out with this nice kind of paste that has a good texture. If it's too sticky, I add a little bit of oatmeal. If it's not sticky enough, I add a little bit of honey. You can play with that a little bit. And then you roll them. And then in the end, I put them either in toasted coconut or in toasted sesame seeds. Roll them in that, and then you have the end result. And the nice thing is that they last quite a while, even out of the fridge. They're shelf stable for a week or something. They won't last that long because you'll eat them all. If you wanted longer, then you could put it into the fridge. Mostly just you have a bunch of different dried fruit and nuts. And I also add a little cardamom and a little bit of sometimes cinnamon or ginger spice, a little bit of rose water, and then you mix it all up in the food processor. And as I like to say, it's as if you get to eat what your stomach normally gets to eat when it's all blended up, and the tastes are very delicious.
I've eaten them. They're really good. That was very rich, just full of knowledge. Again, I don't think any of us are going to look at our food the same after this talk. So unless there's one last question that someone really wants to get in, I think we should listen to our song now. Bring to Agriculture by Emily Levin.
Till the soil and sow the seeds, you can give it what it needs. Nature's perfect harmony, rest on creativity. Bring new agriculture, TM cities, and make it the field of all possibilities. Husk the corn and thresh the wheat, pick the apples when they're sweet, govern season, sun and sea, turn the earth into a tree. Plow the earth and shear the sheep, as you sow, so shall you reap. Flood and famine have their cause in violating natural laws. Bring new agriculture for creativity, showers of soma for invincibility. Boost the crop, increase the yield, all from that unbounded field. Reap the harvest, bale the hay, see the dawn turn into day.
Thank you all for your attention, and I'm happy to answer any questions if there are some in the Q&A box, or if there are some terms that you'd like more detail on.
Well, first of all, I think everyone's feeling really hungry after seeing all those really sumptuous photos. There is a question in the Q&A from Helena. Are Para Prakṛiti and Purusha the same, or is there a slight difference?
So it's two elements of the same coin, because as we saw on the slide, they were both on the level of transcendental, unmanifest consciousness. Two elements, there's this silent aspect and then there's this dynamic aspect. But really, Maharishi explains that they're completely interwoven. So you would always find them both together. It's just that one is more silent and one is more expressed. And so the dynamism, that diversity of creation that we see, is expressed in the Prakriti. And there's the Para Prakṛiti, was the unmanifest value of the dynamism. And then the Apāna Vāta is all the expressed dynamism.
There's a question. So milk and ghee's nourishing value lasts for 1 month?
That's what it says in the Vedic literature. And I think the reason that milk and ghee are considered so nourishing is because they transform into ojas very quickly. This quality of the ghee really brings together, and also the milk, it brings together a lot of nutrition into one substance. So the cow is bringing together the whole field of grass, hopefully it's been eating, and then it's digesting that, and you get this concentrated value of nutrition into the milk. And that milk is basically already digested for you by the cow. And so when you drink that milk, it can very quickly go through the process of transformation in your body. This is another element of Ayurveda called the 7 dhatus. So there's first your plasma, then your blood, then your muscle, then your fat, then your bone marrow, and then finally reproductive fluid. All of these are different tissues in the body. The food has to get transformed through each of those to give you ojas at the end. And so milk has already been digested by the cow. It goes more quickly through all of those 7 stages. That's part of the reason that it can be more nourishing. But nourishing for a month, I think, means that the influence of it stays in our body for quite a while and gives us that nourishment.
Janet asks, thank you, Nicole. Could you please describe the Prakriti called ego? I doubt my general understanding of the word ego is what is meant here.
That's another great question. So Ahaṁkāra, or ego, is at the subtlest level, so we had surface level was the earth, water, fire, air, space, mind, intellect. Intellect is already finely distinguishing. The ego is that level, very fine level of individuality above the transcendental value, because the transcendental value is non-qualities, it's non-diversity, but that ego is just right above there. And that is the individuality that's needed for us to have a human experience. We need to have some individuality, otherwise we would just be the universe. And we can have that experience more and more of the bigger value of our cosmic ego when we are more and more connected to the environment around us. So it's not ego in the sense of I need to be better at this, or these are my extra special skills or something in that regard. It's our individuality that's just coming out from universality. Did you want to add something also?
Yeah, there are two aspects to ego, as Nicole just said. There's the individual ego and cosmic ego. And the individual ego, Janet, I think is probably what your understanding of ego is, where if we have too much ego, too much pride, or our ego gets in the way, and we can't, if we're in an argument, our ego won't let us admit us being wrong, that level of ego. And there's often it's thought like, oh, I have to get rid of my ego, I have to get rid of my ego. And actually, I think the better way to think about it is that we want our individual ego to become cosmic ego, that really finest value, that huge cosmic ego, which is experienced in transcendence. Then these small things don't even faze us. If we get caught up in these smallnesses of life, that's our ego getting caught up in this little argument or that, or our pride. But if we transcend and experience that unbounded awareness, we're experiencing that huge cosmic ego. And then the smallnesses of life doesn't even bother. So we shouldn't think of getting rid of our small ego. We should just think of transcending and gaining that cosmic ego, because ego does have something to do with individuality too. And as Nicole said, it's that element of individuality that allows us to have the experience. So we need the ego. The ego is good. It's not a bad concept. It's just we have to expand our concept of ego to become cosmic ego. Okay, there's another question from Mary. I like garlic. If I eat garlic every day, what is bad effect for body?
I know a lot of people like garlic, and it just depends if you feel a good influence from it. This is why we always say be self-referral. If something brings you bliss and makes you feel balanced and happy, it's probably good for you, especially if you eat it every day. Some people might eat it once and feel like they are more kind of a grounding or dulling influence, but they might not be the right person to eat garlic. And it depends how much you eat. So I think if you're feeling a good effect from it, then that would be fine. If you're noticing that you are maybe not so clear, or that there's some tiredness or dullness there, then you could consider trying not using it for a little bit and then trying it again and seeing what the effect is. Yeah. Oftentimes with food, what they say is don't eat a certain food for maybe a week or something, and then bring it back in. And then you'll notice the actual effect of that food. Because if you're eating something every day, there is some value that's built up. I notice there's another question in the chat that says, should you only eat milk once a month because its value is nourishing for a month? I think what it means in that regard is that the influence continues for a month, that nourishment of the milk. So in the same way, some spice like garlic or some certain food that we ate that maybe didn't go well with our stomach, it continues for a few days until the body digests it fully. And so the idea is to be very alert to your own body of, do I feel good when I eat this? If you feel good, then it must be good for you. And you can always ask also an Ayurvedic practitioner if you wanted to give you a consultation based on your own Prakriti, on your own doshas. They can do the pulse diagnosis where they see at that moment what is your current state of balance or imbalance. But in general, I would say if you really like something, then keep eating it.
Sometimes the Ayurvedic doctors support eating garlic, like if you have a cold, or it's great for the immune system. But again, you should go by your doctor's advice. Comment, garlic is very good for Apāna Vāta and for people who are too Vata. It is warming.
When we look at the quality rather than just the food, and we don't label the food as this food is good or bad, or We just say, what's the quality it gives? So if it's warming and good for Apāna Vāta, then people who need that should eat that. And so it's a matter of matching this quality with what I need, and we match it, and then we get wholeness. The idea is that all of the diversity of nature is there to support us in different situations. So some foods might have a medicinal use, some foods have a daily use, some foods are for just once in a while here and there for fun. And the main thing is that if it's blissful, then that bliss creates more ojas, more vitality, and then we'll have better digestion anyway. It's good to focus on the food. It's also good to focus on our own digestion and our own thoughts while we're eating. If we're happy and enjoying, that will already go a long way towards digesting the food.
Does drinking warm water have the same influence on all the 3 doshas?
In Ayurveda, one of the very easy ways to do a cleanse is to sip warm water throughout the day. And that can have a very good effect of increasing our digestion. It's not something you want to do all the time because it has that more cleansing effect. And it's not the exact same effect. It would be more balancing for Vata, which is cold and dry. Whereas for Pitta, which is hot, it can be a little too much if you do too hot, if the water is a little too hot, or if you do it too long. So Vata and Kapha would benefit the most from that sipping of warm water. Pitta types can do it, but just not as long because the heat will build up in their body. Or they might have it a little cooler, like room temperature is generally recommended. You can have it boiled, but then brought back to room temperature so that the heat is not so much in the water.
What is the Ayurveda thought about a vegan diet?
Because nowadays there's a lot of emphasis on vegan, especially there's 2 different reasons. One is for health reasons, and one is for the principle of not wanting to use any animal product and not wanting to have the effects of the animals on the earth. From an Ayurvedic perspective, generally a lacto-vegetarian diet is recommended. That means vegetarian with also milk and honey. And the idea is that the milk has that very nourishing quality, but it really depends on the quality of the milk. So like anything, if you could say food, there's food and there's food. How is it grown? How are the animals treated? What kind of grass did they eat? How were they milked? How is that milk processed before it got to you? So a vegan diet can, of course, be very fine, but you would have to make sure to eat a lot of oils because that unctuousness that is usually found in the milk is not going to be found if you eat only, say, salads and vegetables. You would need to have the unctuous quality of, for example, olive oil, or coconut oil is good, but maybe if you're eating coconut oil all winter, it could be very heavy because it's cold and white and heavy, as we saw in the slide with the palm tree. So making sure to have enough unctuousness is important for a vegan diet, to give enough kapha, that good kapha structure quality. So all of these elements of carbohydrate, protein, all of that fits in with the knowledge of Ayurveda, slightly different words for the same thing, but understanding that these qualities, so if you eat a lot of protein that's very heavy, you might develop more kapha, but that pitta quality of the digestion might get slowed down if there's too much heavy quality relative to your digestive strength. So it's really important to make sure you have all the qualities in balance. And for a vegan, I would say it's especially important to make sure to have that unctuous quality, that oily quality, because it's not as evident to find it in just fruits and vegetables and grains. You have to make sure to have it in a right proportion.
What is the latest time that we can eat a light meal in the evening before going to bed? How much time should we leave before we go to bed after eating a light soup and toast, for example?
So the principle of the light dinner in Ayurveda is to have the food digested when you go to sleep, because as soon as you go to sleep, the blood is going to come out of the stomach and go to other places in your body to do the purifying mechanisms that are needed during the sleep time. So ideally, your stomach would not be full of food right before going to bed. Now, again, if you eat early, like say 6, you can eat maybe more. And if you have a strong digestive system, you might be already hungry again by 9:30, 10 when you'd ideally go to bed. If you have a more slow digestive system, then you might be able to eat only something lighter. So it really depends on your own digestive system and the strength of it. But the ideal that I've heard is about an hour and a half between a light dinner and going to sleep, so that you have time for it to digest a little, but you're not going to start being hungry again. And so a light dinner, again, means not a huge meal half an hour before you go to bed, because that will go into your stomach and then it won't have the optimum conditions for being digested.
Could you say something about the benefits or disadvantages of eating cooked food versus raw food?
Yes, so now I'll do a pop quiz here. Based on what you've heard, you know that the cooked food is hot, or hopefully it was hot when you cooked it. And the raw food is cold and maybe more hard. It hasn't been broken down by the water or the heat. So the raw food is more increasing of vata, that quality of movement, space, and air, whereas the cooked food has more pitta, that heat and transforming quality in it. So the cooked food is easier to digest. And that's why Ayurveda recommends mostly cooked food. Of course, there's salads and there's ripe fruits. The ripe fruit is considered cooked by the sun. So if it's really been sun ripened, it's been already cooked by the sun. But the idea is to eat mostly cooked food so that your digestive system can have an easier time getting the nourishment out of the food. Because there's a lot that happens in that cooking process that transforms the food. Now, the raw food, people tend to like it because they say it has all these enzymes, it's more fresh, it hasn't been sitting for a long time. So the idea with Ayurveda of cooked food is fresh cooked food, not cooked and then kept for a week and then reheated. That Ayurveda would consider more tamasic, because now the food has been cooked and it's been left to sit for a while and then it has been recooked. So that's too much transformation going on. Another very interesting thing is that if we look at the doshas, things that are more kapha, like the cookies, the cake, the sweets, they're more heavy. They have a more solid structure. Those don't tend to go off as quickly as, say, cooked greens, because those have a lot of enzymes in them. So some of those more kapha type foods you could eat in the evening or the next day, or cookies you can keep for a few days and they'll still be fine. They won't have changed. Whereas things that have more water or more enzymes in them will already start to break down even within a couple hours of being cooked.
Okay.
What's the difference, if any, between consuming whole milk, 2% milk, or skim milk?
Yeah.
It's interesting because Ayurveda says ideally you'd have the whole milk, and if you can't digest it because it's too rich, then dilute it with water. So take the whole milk and make a fourth of the milk and then 3/4 water, because the whole milk has a certain intelligence in it, and the cream has a lot of nutrition in it that is actually very good for you. So the idea from Ayurveda is to just dilute it with water to make it more digestible, and also to boil it, because milk has that very kapha, heavy, white, it's cold, it's that kapha quality. But if you boil it, then you add the heat in, and if you add some spices, that adds more digestion ability. And so for someone who has trouble digesting milk, having it hot or at least warm and then with spices can be a long way towards making it more digestible. I actually wanted to mention there's a dosha quiz for those who are interested to check on their own doshas. You answer a few questions and then you can see what is your particular dosha. If you want to have an Ayurvedic consultation, it's a good idea to put that attention there, because it can make a huge difference in your quality of life.
Nicole put up her website. It's called recipesforbliss.com.
I love to talk about food and recipes, and even take existing recipes and make them more Ayurvedic.